Hello and welcome to Tantrum House Studio Awesome. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Katie. And in this spoiler-free review of Kinfire Chronicles, Night's Fall, Ryan and I are going to discuss how this has one of the hardest tutorial missions that we've ever played in a game, and why we actually liked it. Kinfire Chronicles is a role-playing co-op deck builder game for 1 to 4 players by Incredible Dream.
A mysterious darkness is making people disappear by the thousands, leaving behind terrifying creatures and changing the land of Atios. Can the last great Kinfire lighthouse hold out? Players will be deck building their characters, who wield Kinfire lanterns, to combat the darkness and investigate the starless nights.
So this game is going to be played on a changing map board. Players are going to be making decisions about where to go in this world, who to talk to, and what things need to be done. Cards will give you these prompts, and then you will be making choices depending on what you choose. You could make things really a lot easier on themselves, or just you could make it super hard.
The game has unlockable boxes and envelopes to help upgrade your character's deck. There are also 21 playable scenarios to run through. Each session takes about an hour and really doesn't feel very long at all.
There's some really strict rules when you're upgrading these character decks. Each character has to maintain a really strict balance of cards that they are able to use. Also, each of the action cards comes coupled with a boost card, which is a card that can be played on another player's turn. This means you really have to consider them as a pair of cards, like a unit, and how that's going to affect your deck. The character decks also can only have 18 regular cards in them, plus any of the one-use time cards that you might obtain during the game.
Yeah, the disposable cards.
Disposable cards.
Character decks are used in battle, but also in passing different kinds of checks for obstacles outside of battle in the game. For example, you might be asked to flip 4 cards off the top of your deck, and if you get 2 red cards, then you'll pass. This can make the white wild cards very valuable.
Yes. The art for this game is lovely. The design work really makes everything easy to understand, and there's a really neat component here with the box cover. The box cover is used as the playboard. It has these neat magnets to kind of keep it closed when you're not playing, and the standees for this game, for the playable characters, are made of plexiglass, which feel like a really good quality.
This is a rich world full of surprises and mysteries. There's this overarching mystery of starless nights, but also as you go into the different scenarios, you're presented with smaller mysteries. Mm-hmm. And so with the overarching mystery, you do gain these memory cards that may come into play later in a scenario. They may not. But in the individual scenarios, sometimes you have memories just for that scenario that you discard at the end of it. Mm-hmm. So you really want to see, like, maybe I needed to scout out the way ahead, or, don't bother scouting out, and you get an advantage for plowing through as quick as you can. Mm-hmm. So you got to weigh the pluses and minuses. Is it better to prepare or to be quick?
Yeah, and you don't know what any of these scenarios have in store for you. This has what I feel like is a very rich culture world. There's constantly surprises as we're playing. I'll say, oh, that person seemed to have some negative feelings about this. Is this a thing in this world? And Ryan says, I don't know yet. So we're excited to see.
We didn't get any background information going in, so we're like, oh, those creatures are in here. Oh, those creatures are like this.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and so it's neat. You're learning about the world as you're playing through it. So that makes it feel really fun, with a lot of fun cultures. It's very imaginative. It has really some nice components and nice maps. There's some really neat way that some of this information is delivered to you physically. which I find to be just very refreshing and nice, actually.
Yeah, I think they do a good job of, it's mostly choose your own adventure style role playing, but they do a good job of making your character meaningful. So when you get the level up boxes, you have a little blurb just for your character, like a little aside story just for them. And as you're going through the scenarios, sometimes if you have certain characters playing, you have options that you wouldn't get otherwise just because that character is there. And I think that adds value to the fact that you're playing that character and not that they're just completely interchangeable. I would say playing with 2 players, we have encountered some unique aspects that are for 2 players because I think it's probably easier with more characters just because there's possibly a larger pool of boost cards to be able to be played at any time because you play the boost cards on other people's turns and that would be an advantage to having more players, but
more options for those boost cards.
But because we have only 2 players, we have 6 of the chits that may be pulled out at any specific time. So we'll be going more frequently than if you were playing with 4, because then you'd only have, I think it's 3 for 4 players, 6 for 2.
So what he's referencing is, in the battles, you have chits in there that represent whose turn it is, and you pull those out, so it's a little bit of a random draw whose turn it's going to be in battle, which can be a little scary going in when you realize this guy's going to take me out on his next turn. I hope I get to go before he goes.
Yeah.
But there's so many ways to augment that, like to change who's going first, or to kind of put chits back in and hope that you get things drawn out differently.
I would say that is probably my biggest hang-up on the game, is that you don't know whose turn is next. And there's been several times where you'll take a turn and you're just waiting for the next person to take a turn and you realize, oh yeah, we need to pull something out of the bag.
Yeah, we don't know whose turn it is. We need to pull. Yes. We have had that happen several times where we're just sitting there and I'm like, whose turn is it? Well, we got to draw out of the bag to see.
There are times where you just don't get a turn for a while.
Yeah.
There was one time where we were playing and then we had to put our kids to bed and I was like, I'll just take turns until I draw one of Katie's and then she can take her turn when she gets back and we'll just pause until she gets back. Well, I ended up playing through like a good fourth of the battle.
Yeah.
Because I just kept drawing myself or the enemy and there was nothing that she had to interact with because I think there was a bunch of status effects out, so they weren't able to do anything anyway because of something we had done in the story. So it was just like, oh wow, there are a lot of turns that have happened, but none of them Katie's. So I'm glad I went ahead without her. So that it can be a problem because, what if she'd been sitting there for, 15 minutes and not doing anything? Although she could have played Boost.
I could have played Boost, and that keeps it from being just like, I'm just waiting around for my turn. Like, you can constantly be looking at your cards saying like, oh, if I have this Boost, I can give you an extra movement. Would that be helpful? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So this game is a very approachable RPG, like choose your own adventure. I'd say that it has some pretty easy to follow quick start rules, some pretty easy to understand icons. There's actually not very many icons at all. It has really streamlined battles and use of your decks. It also has enemies that are easy to figure out what their movements are and how they're supposed to be responding. So the game has really done a really good job in streamlining what is normally a very like bookkeeping heavy type game into a very manageable game.
So you start out, there is a getting started rulebook, and you read that, and then you go into the first scenario, and you have a combat rulebook. And then as you go scenario to scenario, you get additional rulebooks until you end up with all of them. So you only get a little bit of the rules at a time, because you only need a little bit of the rules at a time. You only need to digest a little bit of the rules at a time. Mm-hmm. But that means that for that tutorial mission where you're learning about combat, it walks you through the first couple missions, the first couple turns, and it's like, okay, instead of drawing a chit, the first person's turn is you, the person who's reading this. And it happened to be me, and I was one of the weaker people, so I got hit really hard. I was like, oh, I should have had the tank do the reading. That first tutorial was hard, and we lost.
Yes. That we did. We lost our tutorial mission, which I feel like is really unusual.
Yeah. It presented all the information. It didn't hold our hands the entire time, so we forgot about some of the things we could have done.
But even then, I don't know if we would have managed. And I felt like it actually set up a really good tone for the rest of the game. Because there are high chances of losing these battles. Very high chances. And so I feel like it gives you a really good idea of what you're going to be expecting in the game. And I actually really enjoyed losing the tutorial. That really just stuck with me. And I thought that was fun. I mean, it doesn't change a whole lot since it was just the tutorial, but it would have changed a little as we were going into our first actual scenarios of what we were doing and how we were interacting with other characters in the scenes, if we had won. So I did really enjoy that.
I do not like losing.
I feel like it presents a nice hard game to overcome, as opposed to we're just gonna fluff our way through this game.
Okay, so what was your least favorite part of Kinfire Chronicles?
My least favorite part was probably the way we gain Kinfire points, which I think is interesting. Kinfire points are used when you're upgrading your decks. There are certain items or like they're called wards that are like an ongoing action. These things sometimes require you to have a certain number of Kinfires. So, let's say you have 2 Kinfires, you can only have 2 Kinfires worth of cards.
Yeah, either
in your
2
deck.
different cards that are worth 1, or 1 card that has 2.
Yeah, so there are some that, I mean, there's a lot that don't have any Kinfire requirements. But it's kind of a big deal. And the Kinfires are actually gained based on decisions your party makes as a group. And then if you group decides something one way, to do it this way, certain characters, predetermined, will gain Kinfire points based on that. And then some of them will not. And I actually kind of wish that wasn't predetermined for me somehow.
Yeah.
I totally understand why they did it that way. Like, mechanically, I think it makes most sense to do it that way. Else, we'd have it like, the party would always say, oh yeah, this is the obvious way to do it. Or, it adds a little bit of tension to what decision you're going to make. But yeah. I wish there was some other way I was gaining those points.
We aren't experiencing it because we haven't had characters that have encountered it yet. But there are some characters that's like, is Asha present? She gets a Kinfire token. Because there's a special storyline for just that character who was present. Yeah. So
that we haven't encountered that. We have not played all of the scenarios yet, but we have played several, and we have been going like, oh yeah, let's just do one more. Let's just do one more. Oh yeah, just one more. But yeah, so that was my least favorite part. But Ryan, why don't you've already told us your least favorite part.
It was the chits.
It was the chits. So what is your favorite part?
I really enjoyed the deck building part of the game. Having those limits of only the 9 action cards and their 9 boosts. I really enjoy being able to try to thrive under those limits. Mm-hmm. So I'm focusing on getting as many wild cards as I can while getting really strong actions. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to change over from kind of a melee-focused character into a ranged character because Katie is more tanky, so I want to stay out of the fray and fire from range as much as possible. And just make those 9 cards the best they can be. I'm trying to work on a strategy where I can cycle through my deck as fast as possible, because the character that I have, every time every time any character draws a new hand, they get their lantern ability revealed. My lantern ability is a free action. So as soon as I reveal it, I try to play it that next turn. And that means I'm trying to cycle as fast as possible so that I can get that free action.
Yeah. So, my favorite part of this is the same sort of thing. Like, I really liked the deck building part of this. It really intrigued me that their cards were linked with an action and a boost. And I liked that conundrum of this has a really great action card, but I don't think the boost card's going to do that much for me. This one is a slightly lesser action card, but the boost card is going to really help Ryan or help our team a lot as we are playing. And so I've enjoyed trying to focus my character into melee, which was already my character's focus, but also I've been attempting to try to do a lot of things where I add a lot of conditions. And I've got some ongoing cards, some wards that will actually damage our enemies as they remove those conditions. So being able to add a bunch of conditions makes it harder for them to take their turns, and them getting injured every time they're trying to remove those conditions just brings me a little bit of joy. So that really probably is my favorite part of the game, is just the really interesting push and pull of trying to figure out the deck building with the card in the pairs specifically. So we've both really enjoyed the Kinfire Chronicles. If this sounds interesting to you, go check it out. This is by The Incredible Dream, and they have done what we think is a really good job streamlining a choose your own adventure RPG. So check it out.